A new book features early 20th century photographs of St. Louis, and we'll take a closer look next on City Corner. I'm Steve Potter. Welcome to City Corner. A new book features photographs from the early 1900s of St. Louis that probably you have never seen before. The book is Capturing the City, Photographs from the Streets of St. Louis, 1900 to 1930. And our guest today is Angela Dietz. Angela, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
You and a gentleman by the name of Joseph Heathcott put this book together. How did all that start?
Gosh, Joseph has been affiliated with the collection, which we house at the Missouri Historical Society, since it came in to the museum, actually. So he worked to sort of get the collection in when it was previously with the School Sisters of Notre Dame. And he's been, really interested in doing a project around this collection for years. Joseph and I happen to know each other because he was my former professor at Saloon in graduate school.
Oh, really?
So that was really a fun thing to be able to work with him on this project. So we started chatting a couple of years ago, what could we do with this collection? Parts of it have been on view, periodically, but they haven't been all sort of in one project together.
And so to kind of paint the picture, these are photographs that were taken between 1900 and 1930, and they were originally commissioned by the St. Louis Street Department.
St. Louis Street Department. We don't typically think of, a government department, let alone the street department, creating really compelling, amazing photographs. But in this case, luck did strike, and it's a beautiful series of photographs.
Isn't the point, though, that although they took these photographs, I guess, to document street work and things,
Sure, yeah.
What the photographs really do is capture life in St. Louis, because it's all the other things, I guess they sort of capture by accident almost.
I think a little by accident, but the photographer who took these photographs, or who was in charge of the team that took these photographs, Charles Clement Holt, was not well known in his era. He was a government employee. He certainly, I think, would be surprised, I hope a little delighted, that his photographs made their way beyond City Hall into a book and actually an exhibition at the museum. But, he never anticipated these to go much beyond the government office.
Right.
So yeah, I think, I like to think that he has sort of an eye and a sensibility that puts his work into sort of the conversation of other great urban photographers, into that sort of work as well. So, yeah, I think a little bit by accident, but also maybe a little bit on purpose.
And these photographs were really lost for a long time.
For a long time, they were buried in the collection. And the larger story is that this is a very small amount of these photographs. So the street department took thousands and thousands of photographs every year. We have a government report from about 1915, and Charles Holt is writing saying, we took 6,000 photographs and we have another 18,000 back at the office waiting. Wow. But the sad part of that story is when the city was looking to sort of purge its archives, upgrade its technology. These were glass plate negatives. They were kind of bulky, took up a lot of space. They just started throwing the images out. And so that's kind of the second part of the story, is a local dentist by the name of William Swikowski. He was a really interesting guy, quirky guy here in St. Louis. He loved buildings, loved history, and was always down at the Recorder of Deeds office, and sort of made himself very well known in City Hall for all of the research he was doing on buildings. And the employees, I think, liked him and started squirreling away photographs for him and to help him with his research. So he managed to salvage a little over 300 photographs from this collection of thousands of images. It's a sad tale because we only have those 300, but thankfully we do, because it's a rich history.
Well, let's take a look at some of the ones that you brought, and because when you first hear, the street department took pictures.
Yeah.
What's really amazing is how they just reflect like the urban landscape and life in those days.
Absolutely. So this one, and it's cut off just a little bit, so I'll encourage everybody to go and take a look at it in the book or on our website. The reason why I wanted to show this one is we don't have a photograph of Charles Holt. The
photographer?
The photographer, yeah. So for a guy that was so invested in image making, he's a little bit elusive to us. I'm still hunting for one, and I hope to find one. But at the very bottom of this image, there is a man captured in shadow. And again, it's a little hard to see here. It's a little bit cut off, but you get the bowler-style hat that he was wearing, that big boxy camera, a drape that would have gone over the camera.
But just for an example, so why would this photograph have been taken originally? Was it to show that the curb needed repair, or what?
Possibly, right? So
Yeah.
that's something that we're always kind of trying to figure out within these photographs. You know, why did the street department think it was worth sending a photographer down there to document what? It could have been the advertisements, it could have been the paving on the road, it could have been, you know, any number of things.
Do we know where this one was?
Yeah, this is North Taylor from the intersection of Fairfax Avenue. You see Grubber's Saloon and Buffet there in the background, and I love so many of these images have details, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. But on the menu that day outside Grubber's Saloon, you have vegetable soup, roast beef, baked potatoes, boiled cabbage, and spaghetti.
Sounds good.
Spaghetti.
Any prices
Right.
on those?
No, but we do have some that do have prices, and they were quite reasonable, I have to say.
Compared to today's,
Compared to
right.
today.
Why don't
yeah.
we take a look at the next one
Great.
from your book, Capturing the City?
Yeah, so I wanted to show this one because, so you were talking about Holt sort of capturing all of those details and,
Right.
and the richness. This is really emblematic of the way in which Holt worked. And
This is up at Grand Center,
Yeah,
right?
this is.
I remember this, yeah.
Right, so these are bystanders observing street construction at the intersection of Grand Avenue and Olive. This is about 1907.
Right where the Kranzberg is now.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so, you know, he could have made this image in any number of ways, right? He had any number of choices. He could have zoomed in, obviously it's the street construction, I think, that he's probably most interested in.
Right.
He could have zoomed in and sort of focused more on the construction. He could have focused on the construction workers. He could have asked, shoot away all those people, right, to get a cleaner shot.
Right.
But more often than not, he does photograph the thing he's meant to photograph, but he widens that aperture, he widens that lens, and he captures city life as it's being lived.
Do you think he did it on purpose?
You know, I think Holt was from Ohio, and he, you know, was new to St. Louis, and I kind of like to imagine that he was learning about the city through these photographs. And it's so evident throughout the entire collection that he's very interested in life as it's being lived in St. Louis.
Does he have other work that still exists, or is this it?
This is it.
Just what he did for the street department?
This is what we know of, anyway.
Yeah.
I do think he had a bit of a fine arts background. He was a musician, but we don't know a whole lot about, you know, what he thought about these photographs. But there's a lot of loving care and attention to them.
Let's take a look at the next one.
Right.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Isn't that a nice photograph? That's so that's atmospheric shot.
What
for
should we notice
rainy
about
day.
that? What do you notice about that?
Well, I noticed the street, you know. It looks like it's potentially paved with macadam or, you know, sort of this rough paving method. They may have been sent there to see, you know, how does that street hold up on a rainy day?
That's got to be an old gas light, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I love about this image is you have the trolley, you have a car there just, I think, in front of the trolley, and you have a horse and buggy all kind of crowding the roadway. This image has some really interesting signs, too. We have a clothing retailer, the Barnum Hotel, a dentist office, and this is my favorite, a club where baseball fans could, you know, dip in and check scores by inning.
Like a sports bar.
Like a sports bar, exactly.
What's the
You're at a sports
location on
bar.
that?
So here we're on Washington Avenue. We're looking east from 7th Street toward the river, and this is about 1910 to 1915.
Well, I guess since he did all these photographs for the street department, it's all very documented as far as location. You didn't have trouble with
It is.
locations on anything, did you?
That's the terrific thing. We have these really down to a street level, sometimes to an address. When they were with the School Sisters of Notre Dame, they took a detour there from Swikowski. They, with a labor of love, got these images cataloged and documented. They would often put images into the newspaper and solicit help. So this is often a crowdsourced collection. You know, people would write in and say, "I recognize that street corner." And
Really?
And so we have pretty much down again to a street level all of these photographs, which is terrific.
Let's continue with the next image.
Right. Okay.
Where's that?
Well, this is a building at Cook and Vanaventer Avenues. It was for rent. That's probably why they were there, was to document this building that was for rent. I love this image because I'm very interested in the details in these photographs.
And I think Cook and Vanderbilt is kind of like empty lots now, and there are a couple of new construction houses there now, right?
Yeah, so a fun thing to do with this is always to go to the Google Street Map and
Right.
see if you can sort of then and now these photographs. But if you look there at that young boy who's leaning against the post,
Right.
it's a little hard to see. You've got
There
the
he is.
detail there, thank you. And again, it's a little hard to see because it's cut off just slightly, but this young man, he's an African-American boy. He's dressed in some
He's got some personality.
ragtag,
Yeah.
yeah, clothing, unfortunately. He does have some personality. I think he looks a little bit, I don't know if he's a little resigned or, but he's definitely confronting the camera with closed eyes and a look. But the thing that I find so interesting about this photograph is just slightly above him is an image of Abraham Lincoln, a little tiny postcard that's just resting against what might be a mailbox. And I think that is just such a poignant construction that for a street department photograph.
But that wasn't planned that way, do you think?
I don't know. He may have happened upon this scene. Maybe there was some construction going on. Here it's 1920, right? East St. Louis race riots have just happened in 1917. St. Louis is by and large a very segregated city. If we're talking about real estate, right, which this is an image about real estate. Housing covenants are happening. You've got these racial segregation along.
And I wouldn't think, and I could be wrong, I'm no
Yeah.
St. Louis historian, but that
Yeah.
would not have been an African-American neighborhood in 1920.
I believe not. I'd have to check, but yeah. So all of this contained in a street department photograph is kind of stunning, right? Oh, there you can see the image
Oh,
over
right,
there
yeah,
of Abraham Lincoln. And again, I said Holt's work really can be associated with the other great urban photographers of his era, and I think this is an image that kind of points in that direction.
Let's look at another one.
Okay.
Where's this?
Advertising. Okay. So this is posters covering a wall of an undertaking and livery building. We don't see
Undertaking?
those many more. Undertaking and livery.
That's strange.
Combined. So this is 1125 roughly Market Street. You see vaudeville shows being advertised, and it's the Talbot Hippodrome primarily that's got its advertising out. So I love this image because the street department was very worried about advertising and the growth of print advertising
You mean
everywhere in the city.
They found this a nuisance.
I think they found it a nuisance.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you read the government reports, there was clearly a struggle over public space at this point, and the city, was very invested in making sure that this kind of advertisement was regulated and that there were rules about what kind of billboards you could put up and where they could be put up. And
Because as an old photograph, I mean, I find it
Yeah.
very interesting to look at, but back in the time, it probably just looked kind of junky.
it probably looked a little junky.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about what you can tell from some of these photographs, but the city was very invested in regulating the growth in advertising. And we take signs for granted today that they're everywhere, but at this point it was a relatively new thing.
The book is Capturing the City. My guest today is Angie Dietz. This is published from the Missouri History Museum Press. Is that how you phrase it? Press?
You got it,
Right.
yes. Uh-huh.
And we'll continue more with this discussion when we come back.
Thanks.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
The odds of this daughter of a clergyman spending 11 weeks at #1 on the U.S. singles charts? 1 in 19 million. The odds of going on to win 6 Grammy Awards? 1 in 1.4 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 110. I'm Toni Braxton, and I encourage you to learn the signs of autism at autismspeaks.org.
I'm Steve Potter. Welcome back to City Corner. We're talking with Angela Dietz today. It's a new book that she co-authored from the Missouri History Museum Press. It's called Capturing the City, Photographs from the Streets of St. Louis, 1900 to 1930. And Angela, just to kind of recap, there was a gentleman, a photographer that worked for the city back in this time period.
Right.
And he took thousands of photographs every year of street scenes, I guess primarily to document street work.
Primarily, yeah.
But it ended up, your interpretation is showing really life in St. Louis is what it shows.
Absolutely, yeah. Rich details, much beyond the kind of street work he meant to capture.
Now, there is a current exhibition, at least some of these photographs, at the Missouri History Museum now,
Yeah.
correct?
Sure, we have an atrium show that will be up through the beginning of March, March 11th, I believe.
And that was just extended because it was only supposed to be January.
Till January,
right?
yeah. So we extended it a bit, and it's got a small amount of photographs, but they're blown up large, so you can see a lot of the detail.
How many are in the book?
We have over 300 pages worth of photographs in the book.
You know, and one point I want to
many,
make, which
yeah.
we haven't made yet, which I think is important, in addition to these fantastic photographs, you and your co-author have written a lot of text to go along with it. So maybe you should say something about that.
Yeah, so we have a pretty robust introduction that Joseph wrote, which is wonderful, and it puts these images really into context and the work the street department was doing into the context of, you know, what was going on in St. Louis at the time, how was the city unfolding and developing. So that's a great lens with which to sort of look at these.
Well, now that you
images.
mention it.
Yeah.
St. Louis, between 1900 and 1930.
Yeah.
I wasn't around then. What was the city like?
Well, it was the fourth largest city in the country, and so it was experiencing tremendous growth. And I think the point he tries to make in the intro is that you just see a city really trying to figure out what that growth means, right? So you have immigrant populations moving in, you have, you know, people expanding out, you know, westward, so growth of neighborhoods that had not
But it was
been
healthy
populated
and
before.
vibrant and alive, right?
In many ways it was, but there were a lot of people also sort of being left behind by that growth and struggling with it. And so you have some class divisions happening at this time, and it's, again, a city that's really trying to sort of find its way at this point. And I think the photographs sort of reflect some of that growth, but also some of the complexities that come with that.
And what's interesting about it is of what the things that really weren't the subject of the photographs is what you're interested in.
Yes.
Not the broken curb, but the kid standing by
I mean, I like the broken curb, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's the kid standing next to it that
Right.
usually grabs my attention.
Why don't we take a look at one of the images from capturing the city?
Great.
Where would this be located?
Okay, so this is the Walter J. Noble Saloon, and it's at 18th Street, so North 18th Street and Chestnut. And I love this image because, well, first of all, it's a great advertisement, right? But in the center there is a little clock that is on U.S. Observatory time. So this is before Standard Time. It was enacted into law, and it's brought to you by the W.U. Telegraph office. I think you probably know what that is, right? Western Union
Oh, sure,
Telegraph
yeah.
office, right?
Not firsthand.
Right, but W.U. Telegraph would have been Western Union, and so this is a clock that was getting telegraph signals, either hourly or at noon to sort of calibrate, and Western Union would have been responsible for that. So you get the correct time, brought to you by Owl Cigar Company. Yeah.
You know, I'm not a cigar smoker, but I had a friend just recently took me to, do they call it a cigar bar?
Oh.
In Soulard for the first time. Guess what? They're not 5 cents anymore.
Really? Well, maybe you should take this photograph in and convince them to go
I can
back to
negotiate.
it. Yeah.
Let's look at another image from capturing the city.
Okay, yeah, so again,
Interesting.
a little similar to the one we looked at with all the broadsides kind of in various states of disrepair there. This is a man and woman passing each other on the sidewalk. It's the northwest corner of 18th and Olive Streets, if you can kind of place that. And the reason why I wanted to show you this one is advertisements like broadsides are fantastic for dating photographs. So we did have some photographs. We had the street address, but the dates were a little all over the place. But if you kind of zoom in, something greatly aided by digitizing these images at a high level, you can get details about, you know, what was playing at what theater on what date, and that can help you cross-reference with newspapers and find out, okay, well, we can more clearly date this photograph. So here we see there's the Schubert Theater, was showcasing a Broadway production called Town Topics. I tried to find out what that was about, but I couldn't.
No clue, huh?
Not much luck, but I'm sure it's out there somewhere. But it was the week of February 27th, and so I was able to narrow that down to 1916.
What makes it so interesting, and that's the point in a lot of these photographs, is that man and woman, they don't even know each other, and just that one moment in time there where you catch her
There they
passing
are,
him.
yeah.
I don't know what the story is, but it tells one.
But doesn't it make you want to sort of play out what that might have
Yeah.
been? You know, would they
Maybe
meet?
did she stop and turn around?
Right.
Did they have a conversation?
And what language was that conversation in? You know,
I didn't think about
perhaps
that.
it was into, yeah. amazing to imagine.
Let's go to the next one.
Okay, so we often talk about, say, why would the street department have been interested in taking this particular corner or this curb? Here we're
Right,
looking.
because I don't see any like street repair.
Right,
going
we're
on.
looking east on Locust from Lucas Place and from 16th Street rather, and it's about 1914. So again, toward the bottom of the image, it's a little cut off, but you have that seam of pavement versus granite block construction.
Okay,
I
right.
think that's why they're there. Is they're documenting the street paving, and on one side we have sort of this older method, on the other side we have sort of the newer asphalt street paving,
Oh, I
and
see.
there was a lot of competition about which was better. The city it was hotly debated, if you can imagine, in government reports about what kind of street paving would win the day. If you can imagine, the streets were just they were disastrous in many respects. They were muddy and grimy, and on hot days, they let off this dust that could get into your lungs, and so street paving was something that was on the city's mind.
Was there anything that surprised you when, during putting this book together? I mean, anything that you didn't expect?
It's, to me, again, it's sort of all the little details that wind me down a rabbit hole, if you will. So in the image we just had up, you see advertisements for a gas stove, that was a relatively new thing in most urban homes at that point. So of course I started researching all about the gas stove. And, we see the Doris car is advertised there.
Doris Carr was a manufacturer in St. Louis, worked down Forest Park Parkway or somewhere?
That's right. And so, you end up zooming in and out of these images, and you can spend hours just sort of picking apart some of the little details. So those are the surprising things to me, is what I can uncover.
Let's continue.
Great. Okay, so
Now,
children.
wait a minute, there's no street scene here.
No street scene here. I know, this is an odd image for a street department photograph,
Yeah.
right? The interior of a home. It's entitled The Saturday Bath. Okay, so we think that this is probably
Because they didn't take a bath except on Saturdays.
right, which would have been progress actually at this point. So we think this was to showcase sort of progress with the municipal water treatment, which allowed you to have that custom of a
Because
weekly
back
bath.
in the day, this time, a lot of people went to public bathhouses
Public
because they didn't
bathhouses,
have that in
that's
their
right.
homes.
You wouldn't have been able to run water for a luxury like a Saturday bath without the water treatment system. And it also showcases children. So childhood is a big focus of the collection, and so we wanted to show this one. Speaks to the kind of innocence of childhood, right? Many street department photographs, when they feature children, they play up these kind of 21st century notions of what childhood is like.
Right,
So
and it's adorable.
it's adorable.
And then it makes you wonder, like, what happened to them?
Yeah.
What did they grow up to be?
I know, and they were clean at least. We know. Okay, again, that notion of childhood is full of play, and we use this one to sort of represent that. So this is the FJ Vopo Market on Easton Avenue, which today would be Martin Luther King Boulevard. Around 1901 to 1911, you have this really charming photograph. This child with his stilts, he's engaging the camera directly. He always looks like he's maybe in the midst of saying something. He's got a little flower on his lapel. I see some of his playmates there. A little bit of blurry, but children in these photographs are often a little blurry because they're just
moving.
constantly moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They still do that a lot.
They do that a lot, yeah. So again, a kind of notion of children that we would understand, and they're out playing.
You
in
said
the
this
street
picture
corner.
was somewhere between 1901 and 1911.
Yeah.
So that's a whole decade there, you're not sure. But other photographs, you can be very specific, and
Yeah.
others, you're not sure.
And with some more research, I think you can get a little closer if you can determine, when was that market in residence there, dating clothing. There's ways to sort of get a little more nuanced there.
So you being an employee of the Missouri History Museum, did that help you with,
Oh, absolutely.
I knew that was a silly question.
There's an amazing staff there that are so gracious, and when we ask them for help, they jump to it. So yeah, we have many resources over in our Library and Research Center that we can kind of cross-reference these photographs with.
Let's take a look at another image from Capturing the City.
All right. Oh, I love this image.
More kids.
More kids. So look at that little boy on the right. Do you see what he's got on? It's a little hard to tell from this angle, but
On the far right there?
Yeah, so he's got his cowboy outfit
That's what.
on.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Of course, the kids don't change a whole lot, right?
I had an outfit like that.
My nephews still do, right? So this is an unidentified house on an unidentified corner. This is one of the rare ones that we don't have a location for. But I wanted to include that because, again, the idea of childhood is time of play.
Like we said before, these were taken to document street conditions and things.
Yeah. It's hard to tell what.
It's hard to tell that
exactly.
he's doing that in this because it looks like he's purposely talking, trying to tell a story about the kids,
Yeah.
not the curb.
You wonder when he took these images back to his bosses there. They said, a little less children, a little more curb, but
Right.
but yeah, I mean, he sufficiently documents what he needs to, but he definitely gets this wonderful sort of city life in all these photographs. This is a really interesting one because I just showed you a bunch of images about kids, being playful and innocent and the kind of things we recognize. But I don't know if you can tell, this child here, he's about 10, maybe 11 years old. He's on Olive looking towards, we're on Olive looking towards Sarah. He's looking back at us. But if you can tell, he's got a uniform on. Do you see
really?
So the hat has this typical banding on it. He's got a buttoned down jacket.
Do you know what it means?
Yeah, so in doing some comparison with other images that showed children working, this is the Postal Telegraph Company, likely. This is their uniform. And so the Postal Telegraph Company was eventually bought out by Western Union, big telegraph company, obviously, in St. Louis at that time. And they employed, they were known for employing child labor at this point. And so they had these young boys who would tuck the telegraph under their cap and go off on a bike or by foot. And, it was a bit of a harried existence for kids. They weren't in school often. They were under the thumb of a systematic, workforce there, and it was a tough life.
Well, we've only really hit the tip of the iceberg on this. You said you had something like 300 photographs in the book?
Something
like
that, yeah.
I won't hold you down to a
It's a
specific
lot.
number.
They're over 300 pages, I'll say that.
So some of these, a small portion of these are now, can be viewed at the Missouri History Museum
Yes.
until the end of March?
Until the end of March, yes.
What about the book? How do people get the book?
You can buy that in our shop at the Missouri History Museum, or it's available online. It's available through Amazon or the Chicago University Press or through our website.
Let me highly recommend it. The photographs are incredible, and the text really will open your eyes and teach you a lot. And gee, the holidays are coming up. I think this would be a great gift for anybody that cares about St. Louis, or maybe if you have a relative or a friend that used to live here, this would just be a super gift for them.
Great. Well, we'd love to have people stop in and grab a book and
You have another
chat
project
with
coming
us.
up?
And, well, there's the part 2. So I mentioned William Swikowski, who saved all these photographs. He was actually a photographer himself.
Really?
A little different. He photographed buildings mostly that were being torn down within St. Louis. And then he documented them
We got to go, but come back and
extensively.
tell us about that when you're ready, will you?
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Capturing
you.
the City. Check it out. I'm Steve Potter. Thanks for watching today. See you. Bye.